All my life, my family had one word ready for me anytime I had a feeling. Drama. If I cried, I was dramatic. If I spoke up, dramatic. If I said something wasn't fair, dramatic. They said it laughing at first, then with annoyance, then eventually with exhaustion, like I was the burden, the noise, the storm everyone else had to endure. And somewhere along the line, I started believing them. Maybe I am too much. Maybe I really am the problem. Maybe silence is safer than truth. That's how years happen. Not in explosions. In tiny, quiet choices. Bite your tongue. Smile anyway. Pretend it didn't hurt. Hide the parts of yourself that make people roll their eyes. I was pretty good at it. Until the year everything started to crack. It began with the phone calls. Short. Sharp. Careless. My mom leaving voicemails to remind me of everything I apparently wasn't doing right. You never visit. You make everything about you. We're so tired of your attitude. My brother chiming in sometimes. You're selfish. You're impossible. No wonder everyone avoids you. Always spoken with that tone that says this is just the truth. Don't be sensitive. I'd listen. My stomach would not. And then I'd save them. Not to hold a grudge. Not for revenge. But because for the first time in my life, I wanted proof. Proof that I wasn't imagining things. Proof that the way they spoke to me wasn't love with tough edges, but something that slowly eroded who I was. Months passed. More messages. More jokes that sounded like knives. More lectures disguised as concern. And on the outside, everything looked fine. Family dinners. Photos. Holidays. Me smiling. Them proud. Under all of it, something inside me was quietly collecting. Words. Tone. Patterns. One day, during a fight I didn't even start, it finally happened. My mom sighed dramatically into the phone and said, "God, you're such a drama queen. Everything with you is always exaggerated. None of this is real except in your head." And something inside me didn't break. It aligned. For years I had tried to explain. Tried to describe how things felt. Tried to tell them how their words landed in my chest like stones. Every time, they twisted it. Made me question myself. Maybe this time, I thought I won't explain. Maybe this time, I'll simply show. That decision, as small as it sounded in my head, was the beginning of everything that came next. The next few weeks felt like living underwater. Everything sounded muffled. Slowed. Too heavy to carry, and somehow still invisible to everyone else. I went to work. I showed up to dinners. I answered texts. On the outside, nothing changed. Inside, I had started paying attention in a way I never had before. I noticed how often conversations began with what I did wrong. I noticed how rarely anyone asked how I actually was. I noticed the way every boundary I tried to set was treated like an attack. When I said I couldn't come over, I was cold. When I said I was tired, I was dramatic. When I said a comment hurt my feelings, I was too sensitive for this world. One night, after another voicemail that sounded suspiciously like a scolding more than a check-in, I sat on my couch with the lights off and listened again from the beginning. Not just the most recent one. All of them, one by one. My mother's voice. My father's voice. My brother's voice. The sighs. The sarcasm. The little guilt hooks hidden inside sentences that sounded normal at first glance. If you loved us, you'd try harder. You're exhausting. No one else has these problems with their parents. Each line layered itself over years of memories I thought I had misread. And slowly, something shifted. Not anger. Not yet. Recognition. This wasn't drama. This was emotional erosion. This was death by 1,000 cuts that everyone told me were just jokes. Just teasing. Just how families talk. I pressed pause. My thumb hovered over the delete button like it always had. For years, I had erased every piece of evidence because I didn't want to look obsessed. Because I thought forgiving meant forgetting. Because I was sure the problem was me, and I didn't want proof of my failure. But that night, I didn't delete. I labeled the folder. Saved voicemails. Not for revenge. For clarity. For the version of me who would inevitably be told later, that none of this ever happened, that I exaggerated, that I twisted words, that I made everything bigger than it was. The next family gathering came quicker than I expected. A birthday, balloons,
Cake.
laughing, hugs, the whole illusion. I walked in carrying the same smile I had worn my entire life. The smile that said, "I'm fine. Don't worry. I won't ruin anything." My mother kissed my cheek. My father made a joke. My brother slapped my back a little too hard. Everything was scripted, familiar, safe, until dinner. Conversations overlapped. Stories were told. Laughter echoed. Then, out of nowhere, my brother rolled his eyes and said it again in front of everyone. "Well, you know how she is. Our family drama queen." The table laughed.
Some softly.
Some loudly. Nobody questioned it. Nobody wondered what it cost to be the punchline every single time. I felt the heat crawl at my neck. My chest tightened. Old me would have smiled, made a joke back, let it pass, swallowed the hurt and carried it home like homework. But I was tired. Too tired. Instead, I looked around the table slowly. My voice stayed calm, almost quiet. "Do you think I'm dramatic?" I asked. "Or is it easier than admitting the way you talk to me sometimes isn't okay?" The laughter died fast. My mom's fork froze midair. My dad frowned. My brother scoffed.
"See," he said.
"This is what I mean. Always turning things into something bigger than they are." I didn't argue. For the first time, I didn't explain. I just reached into my bag and placed my phone on the table. Somehow, the smallest sound in the room was my heartbeat. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make a speech. I didn't announce anything dramatic. I simply unlocked my phone, scrolled to the folder, and pressed play. My mother's voice filled the room first. Not the soft version she used in public. The clipped one. The one that carried disappointment like a knife wrapped in cotton. "You're exhausting. We don't know how much more of your nonsense we can take. Other kids are grateful. Why can't you just be normal?" The room went very still. The clinking of forks, the background chatter, even the hum of the refrigerator seemed to fade. I watched faces. My aunt blinked. My cousin's eyebrows knit together. My father stared at the table as if the wood suddenly became fascinating. I didn't look at my mother yet. I just hit play on the next one. My brother this time. Laughing, but not the kind of laugh that invites you in. "You wonder why nobody wants to hang out with you. You're impossible. Constantly emotional. It's always a problem with you. Honestly, we're tired." Another silence. He opened his mouth like he wanted to protest, but the sound of his own voice shut him up. I kept going. Not fast. Not theatrical. Just steady. Message after message. Subtle digs disguised as concern. "We worry about you because you're so sensitive." Blame wrapped in guilt. "If you didn't make us so angry, we wouldn't talk to you like this." Conditional affection. "We love you, but you really make it hard sometimes." Each recording landed in the center of the table like evidence in a courtroom none of us had agreed to be in, but somehow we were all sitting through anyway. Halfway through, my mom finally snapped. "Turn that off," she hissed, cheeks flushed. I paused. Not because I was afraid, because I wanted to be precise. "Why?" I asked quietly. "It's just us."
"Right."
"It's not like I'm exaggerating. This is the tone you say I'm imagining when I try to talk about it." She shifted in her chair, looking everywhere but at me. "That's not the context. You're taking things out of context." There it was. The word I had heard my entire life. Context. As if context turned insults into love. As if context made humiliation acceptable. I nodded once.
"Come."
"Okay," I said. "Then let's give them context." And I pressed play again. This time it was the message from the night I had called to say I was overwhelmed, that work was heavy, that I felt lonely and scared. Instead of comfort, there had been sighs. Accusations. "You're too dramatic. People have real problems. You always turn everything into a crisis. Call us when you're ready to act like an adult." The sound of my own small "okay" at the end of that voicemail made my throat tighten even now. Not because of them, because of me, because I could hear the way I shrank in real time. When I finally stopped the recording, the silence wasn't angry anymore. It was stunned. My father cleared his throat. "We didn't mean it like that," he said weakly. "You know how families talk." I met his eyes. For the first time, I didn't look away. "No," I said softly. "That's how our family talks. And when I try to say it hurts, I'm called dramatic instead of heard." My brother pushed back from his chair.
"So what?" he snapped.
"You brought us all here to embarrass us." I shook my head.
"No."
"I brought the truth to the same table where I've been blamed for it my entire life." My hands weren't shaking. My voice wasn't trembling. There was no explosion, no meltdown, just stillness. A stillness so steady it scared them, because it proved everything I had ever been accused of wasn't real. I wasn't losing control. I had finally taken it back. The denial came first. It always does. My mother straightened in her chair like someone had just accused her of a crime she didn't commit. "You're twisting things," she said, voice tight. "We were worried. We were trying to help you grow up. Parents correct their kids sometimes. That's called responsibility." I let her speak. I'd spent a lifetime interrupting myself before I even started. Not tonight. My aunt shifted uncomfortably, glancing between us. My cousins suddenly found their phone very interesting. My father rubbed his temples, the way he always did when a conversation grew bigger than he wanted it to be. "You never appreciate what we've done for you," he added softly, like he was the victim. "You make us sound like monsters." Old me would have rushed in then.
No, I didn't mean it like that."
"You're good parents. I'm just too emotional." I swallowed those words before they could escape. "I'm not saying you're monsters," I replied. "I'm saying the way you speak to me hurts. And when I try to talk about it, I'm labeled dramatic instead of listened to." My brother scoffed loudly. "Everyone gets yelled at sometimes. You act like you're the only person on earth with parents who aren't perfect." I nodded slowly. "You're right. No one's perfect. But there's a difference between imperfect and dismissive. There's a difference between arguing and constantly being told your feelings are invalid." He leaned back, thrown off that I wasn't rising to the bait. He expected tears.
Or shouting.
Or me storming out. That's the thing about people who depend on calling you dramatic. Your calm is the biggest threat they can face. My mother's eyes grew glossy, not from sadness, but from embarrassment. "This is humiliating," she whispered. "You brought this here. In front of everyone." I glanced at the table, then back at her. For years, every conversation about me has happened in front of everyone. My emotions have been jokes at dinners, stories at parties, cautionary tales. Maybe the difference now is that, for once, you're hearing yourselves too. The room inhaled sharply, as if it had never seen me before. And maybe it hadn't. For years, they'd seen a version of me they built. The dramatic one. The emotional one. The problem. It's easier to blame the storm than to admit the roof leaks. My father exhaled slowly. "Okay," he said. "So, what exactly do you want from us?" There it was. The question I had never allowed myself to answer honestly. I took a moment, chose my words carefully. I want my emotions to exist without being mocked. I want to be able to say I'm hurt without being told I imagined it. I want conversations, not character assassinations disguised as tough love. He frowned again, confused. "We don't do that." My thumb hovered over the screen. I pressed play on one more message. It was shorter than the others. My mother's voice.
"Cold.
"If you're going to cry again, call someone else. We're tired of dealing with your theatrics." When it ended, no one moved. No one spoke. I set the phone down quietly. "That," I said, "is what I mean." My mother opened her mouth.
Closed it.
Opened it again. But no words came. My brother crossed his arms like a fortress, face hard but eyes unsure. My father finally leaned back and stared at the ceiling. "I don't remember saying that," my mother whispered. And I felt something strange in my chest. Not victory. Not triumph.
Grief.
Because that's the second layer no one talks about. When the mask finally slips, when the truth is undeniable, you don't feel powerful.
You feel sad.
Sad for the years you spent thinking you were broken instead of hurt. Sad for the version of you who begged for softness and learned instead how to survive without it. Sad because now that the truth is out, nothing can go back to how it was. Not really. I took a deep breath. You may not remember, I said softly. But I do. My nervous system does. My stomach does. My sleep does. My relationships do. My life does. A tension settled over the table like fog. No one reached for their food anymore. No one laughed. For once, I wasn't the only one sitting with discomfort. And that, somehow, felt like the first honest family moment we had ever had. The backpedaling came slowly, like a car trying to reverse out of wet cement. My mother finally found her voice and wrapped herself in the same sentence she had always used as armor. We did our best. It sounded gentle, noble, untouchable. I nodded. I know you did. But our best can still hurt people. She shook her head like the idea offended her. We sacrificed everything.
Food.
Vacations. Sleep. We worried about you every second of our lives. And this is what we get back. Accusations. Recordings played at the dinner table. There it was again. The quiet flip. The shift from my pain to their suffering. The way the spotlight always turned off me the moment I tried to stand in it. My father chimed in softly. You've always been sensitive. We had to toughen you up. The world isn't kind. I swallowed. You're right. The world isn't kind. That's why home should have been. He blinked at that. Not angry. Just startled. Like the thought had never crossed his mind. My brother scoffed again, but weaker this time. Other people have it worse. You act like you survived some tragedy. The old reflex rose in me. Apologize. Minimize. Laugh it off. But I let it pass through like a wave that no longer had anywhere to crash. Pain isn't a competition, I said quietly. And the fact that others have scars doesn't make mine imaginary. My aunt finally spoke, voice careful. I didn't know, she said. I mean, I heard some of the comments, but I thought that's just how your family jokes. I gave a small, sad smile. Everyone thinks that, until they're the one in the middle. Another silence. My mother pushed her plate away, like the food itself had betrayed her. So what now? She asked. You want apologies for every voicemail, every word we ever said wrong. The truth was complicated. I didn't want groveling. I didn't want them on their knees. I didn't want to rewind time and rewrite every sentence. I wanted acknowledgement. I wanted someone, anyone, to look at me and say, yes, that happened. And it hurt. And we're sorry. But I also knew something else. Some people don't apologize because they genuinely don't see what they did wrong. Others don't apologize because doing so cracks the story they built about themselves. My family's favorite story was simple. We are good parents. Good siblings.
Good people.
If I was hurt, the easiest explanation was that I was dramatic. If I was upset, I was overreacting. If I cried, I was emotional. I had been carrying that role like a costume for years, tailoring myself smaller, so the story stayed neat. Tonight, I laid it on the table with the phone. I don't want a performance, I said finally. I don't want rehearsed apologies or speeches. I just want honesty. Can we at least stop pretending that I'm crazy every time I bring this up? My father sighed, shoulders sinking like he'd suddenly grown older. I'll admit, he said slowly, there were times we were harsher than we should have been. My mother shot him a look, but he kept going. I thought if we pushed you, you'd become stronger. Independent. I didn't realize we were making you feel alone. Something in me softened at that. Not because it fixed anything, but because it wasn't deflection. It was the closest thing to truth I had ever heard leave his mouth about us. My mother's eyes shimmered, not with guilt yet, but with fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of losing the version of the story where she was always right. You always pick the worst moments, she whispered. Holidays. Dinners. Family gatherings. Why can't we ever talk about these things calmly? I exhaled slowly. Because when I try to talk calmly, I'm dismissed. When I call privately, I'm dramatic. When I text, I'm ignored. The only time anyone listens is when the truth sits in the middle of the room with everyone watching. The truth landed again. Heavier.
Truer.
Unavoidable. My brother slumped back in his chair, expression unreadable. I could see the flicker there, though. Recognition. Not full acceptance, but something cracking open. The quiet that followed wasn't comfortable. It wasn't peaceful. It wasn't pretty. But it was real. And for the first time in my life, real felt better than pretending. That's when the cracks really started to show. Not in me.
In them.
My mother folded her napkin slowly, like she needed something to control with her hands now that she couldn't control the conversation. You know, she said, voice trembling but sharp, you've always had a way of turning people against us. There it was, the story tightening around me again. I wasn't hurt. I was manipulative. I wasn't finally speaking up. I was orchestrating a scene. I let the accusation hang in the air instead of rushing to deny it. My father watched me carefully, maybe expecting the explosion that never came. She's not turning anyone against anybody, he said quietly. She played what we said. My mother's jaw tightened. We were stressed. We were worried. She only saved the worst things. Why didn't you save the times we encouraged you? The times we helped you? I swallowed. Because those weren't the ones keeping me up at night. Her face fell, offended and wounded all at once. So everything we did means nothing. I shook my head. That's not what I said. But good moments don't erase harmful patterns. A hug doesn't undo humiliation. A nice dinner doesn't erase years of being called dramatic every time I had a feeling. My brother leaned forward, elbows on the table, voice lower than before.
Okay.
Let's say you're right. Let's say some of what we said was harsh. Why bring it up now? Why can't you just move on? That question hit deeper than he knew. Because moving on had been my specialty. Swallow it. Bury it. Pretend it never happened. The cost had been invisible to them, but enormous to me. My anxiety. My self-doubt. My instinct to apologize for existing. I did move on, I said. Again and again. And every time I did, it taught you that you could say whatever you wanted, and I would just absorb it. He frowned. So, what? This is revenge. I shook my head slowly.
No.
This is boundaries. This is me saying I'm done being the family emotional punching bag. Something in the room shifted. Not loudly. Quietly. The kind of shift you feel in your chest more than you see with your eyes. My father laced his fingers together, thinking. What do boundaries mean? He asked. In your mind. It was the first time anyone had asked me that without mocking the word. My throat tightened, but my voice stayed steady. It means if I tell you something hurts, you don't get to tell me it didn't. It means you don't get to call me dramatic when I'm expressing pain. It means if the tone turns cruel, I will end the conversation, even if that makes you mad. My mother scoffed. So now we have to walk on eggshells. I offered a sad smile.
No.
You just have to stop throwing stones. The table went quiet again. It wasn't dramatic. No shouting. No plates breaking. Just the sound of an old family script slowly unraveling thread by thread. My aunt dabbed at her eyes. I wish someone had taught us this when we were younger, she murmured. We grew up thinking love meant toughness, silence, endurance. I nodded gently. I know. That's why I'm not here to punish anyone. I'm here because I don't want to carry this into my own life anymore. For the first time, my mother's shoulders slumped, and the fight drained a little from her face.
Not gone.
But dimmer. So what happens next? She asked, not accusing this time. Just unsure. I sat back, feeling the weight of the moment. The answer wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic. It was simple, honest, and terrifying. What happens next depends on whether this house becomes a place where I'm allowed to exist as a whole person. If it doesn't, I'll love you, but I won't keep sitting at tables where I have to disappear. The words didn't explode. They settled. And once they landed, no one tried to laugh them away. No one rolled their eyes. No one called me dramatic. For the first time in years, my voice was in the room, and it stayed there. Dinner didn't end with hugs and grand declarations like in movies. It ended with silence. The kind that doesn't punish. The kind that forces reflection.
People stood slowly.
Plates were carried to the sink. Conversations splintered into small nervous whispers in the kitchen and hallway. I stayed seated for a while, letting my breathing come back down from somewhere just beneath my ribs. My mother disappeared first, claiming she needed to freshen up. My brother pretended to text someone, probably, so he wouldn't have to meet my eyes. My father lingered at the table longer than usual, staring at his hands as if they suddenly belonged to someone else. It didn't feel victorious. It didn't feel like I had won. If anything, it felt like stepping outside after a storm and seeing the branches scattered across the yard. Not destroyed, just exposed. My aunt came over quietly and squeezed my shoulder. Not a pity squeeze. Not a performative one. A grounding one. "Thank you for saying it out loud," she whispered. I swallowed the lump in my throat and nodded. After a few minutes, my father finally cleared his throat. "Take a walk with me," he said. It wasn't a command. More like a request from someone who suddenly realized commands don't work anymore. We stepped outside into the cool night air. The world felt strangely normal. Cars passed. A dog barked somewhere down the block. A porch light flickered on. He shoved his hands into his pockets and didn't speak right away. Old him would have filled the silence with lectures, quotes, logic. This version just stood next to me, thinking. When I was your age, he finally said, nobody cared how he felt. You were supposed to keep going. Push through. Don't complain. I nodded, not to excuse anything, but to acknowledge the reality he came from. I know. He exhaled. I thought I was protecting you by making you harder, so the world wouldn't crush you. He paused. But maybe I helped the world do it. Those were not the words I ever expected from him. They didn't fix the past, but they cracked something open. I don't know how to talk like this, he admitted. It feels like walking on a rope. It feels like that for me too, I said softly. But I'd rather wobble on a rope than drown quietly again. He gave a small nod, like he understood more than he knew how to articulate. Your mother, he added carefully, takes things personally. Everything feels like blame to her. She'll need time. I expected that. Boundaries to someone who's never had them can look like betrayal. Distance can look like punishment. Honesty can look like disrespect. I'm not trying to make enemies, I said. I just don't want to keep losing myself to keep the peace. We stood there for another moment, not hugging, not promising anything, just existing side by side, without pretending. And weirdly, that felt like progress. When I went back inside, my brother was leaning against the counter, arms crossed, expression unreadable. For the first time that night, he avoided sarcasm. You saved all those voicemails, he said. Not accusing, not mocking.
Just processing.
Yeah, I replied, because I needed to hear the truth when everyone told me I imagined it. He nodded slowly, jaw tight. Hearing my own voice like that, it didn't sound like I thought it did. A small space opened between us. Not full understanding, not apology, but awareness. That was new. I gathered my things after a while. No dramatic exit. No slamming doors. My mother didn't come down to say goodbye, and I didn't force a goodbye out of her. I simply slipped my shoes on, grabbed my keys, and walked out with the quietest sense of relief I had felt in years. Not because everything was solved, but because, for once, I hadn't left myself behind at the table. That night in bed, staring at the ceiling like I had so many nights before, I noticed something missing. The spiral, the overanalysis, the replaying every word to see if I was wrong. Instead, there was stillness. Not peace yet, but stillness. A beginning. I realized something then. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do isn't scream. It's refuse to shrink. The next morning felt strange. Not like waking up after a fight. More like waking up after moving furniture in the dark. Everything was still in the room, just in different places. I made coffee. sat at the table, opened my messages with a slow, steady breath. There they were. 3 missed calls from Mom, 2 texts from Dad, 1 from my brother. No group chat apology. No dramatic threats. No, how dare you? Just fragments. My mom's first message was short. I didn't sleep. Then, a few minutes later, that wasn't fair. Then after that, you embarrassed me. I stared at those words. Not angry. Not crying. Just noticing. She didn't say she was hurt. She didn't say she was confused. She didn't say she was processing. She said she was embarrassed, which told me exactly where the wound lived for her. Not in the memory.
In the image.
My dad's text came next. We need to talk when everyone's calmer. That actually felt reasonable. Calm was a language I could work with. My brother's message was different. Listening back last night messed me up. I'm thinking. That one surprised me. Growth always looks awkward at first. Like a kid trying on shoes half a size too big. I didn't reply right away. Old me would have rushed. Explained.
Soothed.
Sent paragraphs trying to control how they saw me. New me sat with the silence. I let the uncomfortable space exist without filling it. Coffee. Window light. Quiet. My phone buzzed an hour later. Mom again. I'm not a monster. You made me sound like one. I closed my eyes and breathed slowly. This was the pattern. Instead of sitting with the pain of what happened, she rushed to protect the story about herself. Good mother. Always tried. Did her best. And maybe some of that was true. But truth doesn't disappear just because it makes you look less perfect. I finally typed back.
Slowly. Carefully.
Like handling glass. I didn't call you a monster. I described my experience. They're not the same thing. I stared at the screen before pressing send. My chest tightened. But I didn't delete it. I hit send. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Then the reply.
Well.
Your experience hurt me. I nodded to myself. There it was. A sentence that sounded like accountability, but wasn't. Your truth is the problem. Your memory is the enemy. I could feel the old urge rising. Explain. Convince. Make it easier for her. I set the phone face down and walked away. Sometimes the healthiest boundary is not the perfect sentence. It's simply stopping the conversation before you bleed out in it. I went for a walk. Long blocks. Crisp air. Leaves crunching under my shoes. Thoughts sorting themselves out while my feet kept rhythm. Somewhere between a broken sidewalk and a quiet intersection, it hit me. For years, I believed closure was something my family had to give me. An apology. A confession. A sudden moment of clarity where they'd finally see the full weight of everything. But what if closure wasn't something given? What if it was something I decided? A decision not to chase explanations. Not to drag people to understanding when they're not ready to stand there. When I got back home, a voicemail notification blinked on my screen. My mom. Of course. I hesitated, then pressed play.
Her voice was softer this time.
Not angry. Not defensive.
Tired.
I listened to some of those again, she said. I didn't remember sounding that way. I don't know who that person was.
Pause.
A breath. Maybe I was overwhelmed. Maybe I said things wrong. But I always loved you, even if it didn't sound like it. I didn't cry. I didn't melt. I didn't run back into the role of forgiver at all costs. I just listened. It was imperfect. Unpolished. Not an apology. But it wasn't an attack either. And for once, that felt like enough for today. I saved the voicemail. Not as proof against her. Not as a weapon. But as a reminder that even people who hurt us deeply are sometimes just stuck. Trapped inside their own unhealed stories. Later, Dad called. I answered.
His voice was steady.
I think we all need time, he said. And maybe some help. A counselor. Someone neutral. I almost dropped the phone. My father. Suggesting therapy. Reality had definitely shifted. That could be good, I said quietly. No promises. No big plans. Just possibility. And possibility felt like oxygen. That night, as I made dinner, I replayed the event in my head, but it didn't swallow me whole like memories used to. It just passed through. I realized another truth then. Speaking up didn't destroy my family. It just removed the illusion that everything had been fine. And illusions deserve to break. A week passed. Not the kind that flies by. The kind that stretches. Quiet, heavy, thoughtful. I went to work. I cooked. I answered emails. I laughed at small things. And in between all of that, I felt the slow shifting of something I couldn't quite name. Distance. Not the cold, punishing kind. The intentional kind. The kind where you step back just enough to see the whole picture instead of living pressed up against it. My mom texted occasionally. Short messages. Careful ones. Did you eat? How's work? Nothing about the voicemails. Nothing about the night everything cracked open. It was like she was walking around a deep hole in the ground and refusing to look down into it. My dad was different. He checked in, but he didn't avoid the topic. I've been thinking about the recordings, he said once. There were things I didn't notice at the time. Things I should have. The honesty was uncomfortable, but also strangely grounding. You can't heal with someone who pretends the wound never happened. One evening, he called.
No small talk.
No weather. Just, would you come over for dinner?
Just you.
Not everyone. My stomach tightened. Old instincts whispered. Be careful. Protect yourself. But another part of me, the part that finally had a voice, said, go if you want. Leave if you need to. I agreed. Not because I trusted everything again, but because I trusted myself more than before. Dinner smelled like childhood. Garlic. Onion. Something simmering. Familiar but layered now with memories that complicated the nostalgia. Dad set 2 plates on the table. No TV on. No distractions. Just silence stretching between us. He cleared his throat. I listened to all of them, he said quietly. Every single one. More than once. My fork paused. He stared down at his food. You sounded small, he said. Like you were always trying not to take up space. I swallowed. That sentence hit harder than I expected. He took a deep breath. I don't know when I started believing that if you weren't complaining, you must be fine, he continued. That was lazy. And unfair. I waited for the but. The justification.
The softening.
It didn't come. He just sat there, letting the truth exist without an exit ramp. That mattered. A lot. I'm not asking you to forget, he added. I'm asking if you let us try differently. Not perfect. Just different. I nodded slowly. Not a full yes. Not a rejection. Just acknowledgement. After dinner, he handed me a small envelope. My chest tensed. Old reflex. Money comes with strings. Expectations.
Guilt.
Inside wasn't cash. It was a handwritten note. Simple. Honest. I heard you. That was all. And yet, it landed heavier than any expensive apology gift ever could. When I got home, Mom called. I answered cautiously. Her voice was softer. Hesitant. Your dad said you came over, she said. Did it help? I took a breath. A little, I said truthfully. Long pause. I'm not good with being wrong, she admitted. The confession felt like a loose nail finally being pulled from a floorboard. When you play those messages, I hear a version of myself I don't want to be. And instead of facing it, I attack the person holding the mirror. That was the closest she had ever come to saying, I hurt you. I didn't rush to fix it. I didn't say, it's okay. It wasn't, but it was progress. I don't know how to fix all of it, she said, but I'm willing to learn. If you'll be patient with me. I thought about that wording. Will you manage my feelings while I learn to manage yours? It wasn't malicious, but it was still pressure. I'll be honest, I said instead. And I'll take breaks when I need to. Silence. Then, softly. Okay. Growth isn't cinematic. It doesn't look like movie hugs and dramatic apologies. Sometimes it looks like awkward pauses. Long quiets. Words dragged out slowly, shaped carefully, placed down like fragile glass. Over the next few days, something else shifted. My brother texted again. Longer this time. I keep replaying the night you played those, he wrote. I was mad at you at first. Now I'm mad at myself. I let a lot of stuff slide because it never landed on me. Responsibility looks different when it finally costs you something. We talked. Not as enemies. Not as allies against our parents. But as two adults trying to see the same truth from different angles. I realized then that this whole time I had been terrified that speaking up meant losing everyone. But instead, it was like rearranging the cast. The roles were changing. And not everyone fought it. Some actually stepped forward. Therapy started a few weeks later. Family sessions. Some messy. Some exhausting. Some quietly transformative. My mother cried more than I had ever seen her cry. My father apologized more than I ever imagined he could. I didn't always accept. I didn't always respond kindly. I wasn't perfect. Healing rarely is. But I stayed present. I stayed honest. And I didn't shrink. At night, I'd sit in bed, lights low, phone quiet, and realize something new each time. Speaking my truth wasn't revenge. It wasn't punishment. It was reclamation. Of my voice, my memory, my place in the story. And every time someone said, I didn't realize, I understood something important. Of course they didn't. I had been trained and had trained myself to disappear. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, invisibly, with a smile. Now, for the first time in years, I wasn't disappearing. And the world, my family included, simply had to adjust. Progress has a strange habit. Just when you start to feel steady, the universe shakes the table to see if you really meant it. 2 months after our first family therapy session, my mom invited everyone over for Sunday dinner. Nothing big, she said. Just us. Simple. Calm. I almost laughed. There is nothing simple about sitting down with people who are learning to see you for the first time. I showed up anyway. Not out of obligation. Out of curiosity. The kitchen smelled like roast chicken and rosemary. Music hummed softly in the background. My mom fussed with the napkins like the pattern might decide how the evening went. My dad poured water instead of wine, like he didn't want anything dulling his ability to stay present. My brother leaned against the counter, quiet, watching. Dinner started gently. Safer topics. Work. Weather. The neighbor's noisy dog. Then, like it always does, conversation drifted toward the past. Remember when you used to cry over everything? Mom said, laughing lightly, pointing at me. We used to joke she could win an Oscar. The old joke. Harmless on the surface. A blade underneath. I felt the instinct rise immediately. Smile. Laugh. Make it easier. But something steadier spoke louder. That wasn't drama, I said calmly. That was distress. The room stilled. Mom blinked. I was overwhelmed, I continued. And instead of being comforted, I was called dramatic. So I learned to shut up. Dad set his fork down slowly. Mom swallowed, color rising in her cheeks. I didn't mean it like, I know, I said. But it still landed. Silence again. Not angry. Reflective. She nodded eventually.
Small. Tight.
Okay, she said. Noted. We moved on. A tiny shift. Barely visible. But real. Later, while we cleared plates, Jason cornered me by the sink. You're different, he said quietly. Not accusing. Curious. I'm honest, I corrected. There's a difference. He nodded. I like this version of you. It's harder, but clearer. That night, I drove home with the windows cracked, cool air brushing my face, realizing something new. Growth didn't mean erasing the past. It meant refusing to live trapped inside it. A few weeks later, the old pattern tried a stronger comeback. Mom called in the middle of my workday, breathless. Could you swing by after work and help with some paperwork? She asked. It'll only take a minute. That sentence had cost me years of evenings. What paperwork? I asked. Insurance stuff. Government forms. You're good with computers. I'll make dinner. Old me would have said yes instantly, even with deadlines, even exhausted. New me checked my calendar.
Checked my body. Checked the price.
I can't tonight, I said gently. I have plans. But I can help Saturday morning if you gather everything first. Silence. The kind that used to make me panic. Then, quietly. Okay, Saturday. No guilt. No lecture. Just acceptance with a tiny hint of learning. Saturday came. Papers were actually organized. We finished in an hour. She thanked me. Not the performative thank you she used to give, laced with expectation. A real one. Short. Sincere. It feels weird, she admitted, asking instead of assuming. It feels better, I said. Life balanced into something almost peaceful. Not perfect. Not tidy. But honest. Then came the test I didn't see coming. A family gathering. Cousin's engagement party. Loud music. Hugging relatives. Old dynamics. The exact environment where I used to shrink. I walked in prepared. Or so I thought. Within minutes, an aunt smiled sweetly and said, "So, are you still being sensitive about everything?" Like it was gossip. Like my healing was entertainment. I felt heat rise up my neck. My mom stood nearby, listening, waiting. In the old world, she would have laughed along.
Dismissed.
Minimized. This time, she surprised me. She wasn't sensitive, Mom said evenly. She was ignored. The aunt blinked, thrown off balance.
I didn't say anything.
I didn't need to. The correction stood on its own. Later, outside on the porch, Mom exhaled shakily. That was scary, she admitted. I smiled. Growth usually is. Driving home later, headlights painting long lines on the road, it hit me. Healing doesn't mean flipping a switch. It's dozens of tiny decisions.
To speak. To pause.
To walk away.
To stay.
To stop performing. And every tiny decision rewrites the script a little more. But the biggest rewrite hadn't happened yet. The one where I finally told my parents the truth I had avoided the longest. That I loved them. But I was never going back to being the convenient, quiet version of myself ever again. And whether they could walk beside the new me would be entirely up to them. There's a moment in every healing journey when the work stops being about them and finally becomes about you. Not about winning. Not about proving. Not about forcing anyone to understand. Just about choosing peace over performance. Mine showed up on an ordinary Wednesday afternoon. No drama. No big family fight. Just a quiet text from my mom. Can you come over tonight? Important. My stomach tightened. Old reflex. Urgency had always been their favorite tool. Make everything sound like an emergency, so I jump without asking questions. I took a breath. Slowed myself down. What's it about? I typed. A few minutes passed. Then the reply. Your dad and I listened to the last voicemail you played again. We want to talk about it together. We don't want to fight. That sentence felt new. Intentional. Careful. I said I'd come. But I set a boundary first. An hour. Then I need to head home. Okay, she wrote. No pushback. When I arrived, the house felt strangely still. No TV. No clattering dishes. Just my parents sitting at the dining table like two students waiting for a difficult exam. My dad cleared his throat. We didn't like hearing ourselves, he said. It was ugly. Mom stared at her hands. I kept thinking, who talks to their child like that? A younger version of me would have rushed in there. You're not bad parents. It's okay. Let's move on. But the truth was, it hadn't been okay. And rushing would only bury everything again. So I stayed quiet. Let them sit in it. My mom finally looked up. I confused providing with parenting, she said. We worked. We paid bills. We did big gestures. And I thought that meant we were good. Her voice trembled. But I guess we forgot the smaller things.
Listening.
Showing up. Being gentle. My throat tightened. Not because I needed an apology to survive. I had already chosen to heal with or without it, but because hearing honesty from someone who used to hide behind excuses felt like watching a door unlock. My dad nodded. And when you brought pain to us, he said, we treated it like a problem that made us look bad. Not like something you were actually living through. He took a deep breath. That was wrong. Not perfect words. Not dramatic. Just simple.
Clear.
I felt something soften inside me. Not erasing what happened. Not rewriting history. Just releasing its grip. Thank you, I said quietly. That means something. Mom wiped her eyes. We can't change what we did, she whispered. But we want to do better with what's left. This was the part where old me would have promised everything. Weekly dinners. Constant availability. Becoming the emotional ambulance again. Instead, I spoke carefully. Doing better doesn't mean I go back to who I was, I said. It means learning how to have a relationship that doesn't cost me myself. They both nodded slowly, like people learning to read a new language. We talked for a while longer.
About therapy.
About triggers. About memories we each carried differently. When the hour ended, I stood up. Hugged them. Not out of obligation. Out of choice. In the car, with the engine humming quietly, a thought washed over me like warm water. I wasn't waiting anymore. Not waiting for apologies. Not waiting for recognition. Not waiting for some big cathartic movie moment that fixes everything overnight. I had built a life outside the hunger for their approval. And now, any healing that came was simply extra. On the drive home, the city lights blurred past, soft and golden. Traffic moved gently. My favorite song came on the radio, without me touching a button. Little signs. Quiet confirmations. You're okay. You're safe. You're not that child anymore. At a red light, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. Older. Clearer. There was no bitterness there. Just boundaries. And that's when I understood something I wish younger me could have heard. Sometimes you don't get justice. Sometimes you don't get the apology you practiced for. Sometimes the people who hurt you will never fully grasp how deep the wound went. But healing isn't them changing. Healing is you refusing to live your entire life waiting for them to. And in that simple truth, there is freedom large enough to breathe in. The funny thing about healing is that it doesn't come with fireworks. No big applause. No cinematic music swelling in the background. It shows up quietly, in the moments nobody else notices. Like the first time my phone buzzed with my mom's name and my chest didn't tighten. I simply looked at the screen, decided whether I had the energy, and answered only if the answer was yes. That was new. Freedom wrapped in something ordinary. Or the day my dad asked for help with something and added, "Only if you can. If not, we'll figure it out." That sentence alone felt like a miracle. Not because it erased the past, but because it showed a shift. A tiny one, but real. I started to see my childhood with clearer eyes too. Not through the lens of blame. And not through the lens of excuses. Just truth. My parents had been raised by people who didn't know gentleness either. They copied what they saw. They survived. Then they called survival love. But survival isn't the same as care. Toughness isn't the same as support. Silence isn't the same as peace. And my life didn't have to repeat their patterns just because I was born inside them. That realization became a compass. It guided where I went, who I kept around, what I tolerated, and what I walked away from. Slowly, my world filled with people who didn't need to see me struggle in order to believe I was strong. Friends who checked in without drama, who asked questions without suspicion, who didn't punish me for having limits. I learned that chosen family isn't betrayal. It's repair. It's giving your heart the environment it should have had from the beginning. One Sunday, months later, my mom invited me for dinner. Nothing dramatic. Homemade pasta. Quiet conversation. Halfway through the meal, she put down her fork and looked at me carefully. "You're different," she said. "Not colder. Just steadier." I smiled. "I stopped trying to earn my place," I said. I finally understood I was never supposed to audition for love. She went quiet. Her eyes filled. Not theatrical tears. Just honest ones. "I wish I had known how to teach you that," she whispered. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Me too," I said. "But I know it now." Later that night, driving home, windows cracked, cool air moving through the car, I realized something else. For years, I had confused revenge with justice. I thought telling my side of the story, standing up, playing the voicemails, calling out the hypocrisy, that was the peak,
The victory.
and in some ways it mattered. Naming truth always matters. But real revenge, the quiet kind, looked different. It looked like building a life that didn't revolve around pain. It looked like laughing again, without guilt, sleeping through the night, eating meals without anxiety twisting in my stomach, saying no, and not composing an apology afterward, choosing myself without feeling like I was choosing violence. That was the part nobody talks about. The soft aftermath. The new space. The room to breathe. I went home, fed the plants, took a shower, made tea, sat on my couch, and listened to the rain. For once, my brain wasn't replaying old arguments. I wasn't scripting comeback lines. I wasn't rewriting history in my head. I was simply there, present.
Whole.
I thought about the girl who started this story. The one who kept receipts of every voicemail because nobody believed her when she said she had been hurt. The one who lived with her guard up because softness felt dangerous. I wanted to tell her what I know now. You weren't dramatic. You were dismissed.
You weren't needy.
You were neglected. You weren't too much. You were finally asking for enough. And when you stopped showing up, it wasn't abandonment. It was self-rescue. One day, I might play those voicemails again. Maybe for someone who needs to hear that they're not imagining things. Maybe for a future therapist. Maybe never. Not out of fear this time. But because the proof no longer keeps me alive. I keep me alive. And that is the quiet triumph. No applause. No spotlight. Just the steady knowledge that I no longer need to perform pain to be taken seriously. My mother once called me strong as an excuse to not help me. Now, when someone calls me strong, I ask a simple question in my head. Does this strength cost me myself? If the answer is yes, I choose differently. Because I have learned that I can be brave and still ask for support. Independent and still deserving of care. Tough and still allowed to sit down when I'm tired. Healing didn't turn me into someone else. It brought me back to who I had been before I learned to disappear. And if there is any ending to this story, it is this. I stopped showing up to play the role they wrote for me. And that was the first time in my life I finally felt present in my own,